Hey everybody, welcome back to James Draws Everything. Today continuing with our Drawing Every Country in the World's Flag series. And today we're going to go right in between kind of the edge of Europe into Russia. We're going to be doing Ukraine. Okay, controversial, right? So you definitely know what the Ukraine flag looks like, you know, especially post the Russian invasion into Ukraine. Probably see a lot of people that couldn't even point out to where Ukraine was on a map 5 years ago, all of a sudden having very strong opinions about this country. So let's just get this over with. And I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson on Ukraine as I'm doing the flag. So Ukraine is actually the birthplace of the Russian people. The Kievan Rus form a state there around the 10th and 11th century. Fights off a lot of Mongolian invasions, and that's pretty much the start of like modern Russia, or not modern Russia, but Russia as like a specific like Russian empire, Russian identity comes from that time period. So that kind of spreads into Moscow from Kiev, and the Ukrainian identity that kind of forms when they become part of the Lithuanian, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and then later the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. There's some rebellions by the Ukrainian people against that. They're not really like a Ukrainian people yet, though. They are still, I mean, racially, they're, identical to the Russians. And Ukraine never really has been like an actual like functioning like state or country. It's always just kind of been like a crossroads between larger powers, and it's a lot of Hungarian people there, a lot of Poles, a lot of Russians, Czechs. So it's a very very diverse kind of a group of Central European peoples. So they do form a Cossack state after they kind of win some independence against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the 17th century. 18th century, they do get absorbed into the Empire of Russia, and this is where the troubles kind of start with like the Ukrainian identity versus the Russians. So in 1917, of course, the Bolshevik Revolution happens. And Ukraine was, I mentioned this before with some of these Eastern European states. That was a bad time to achieve independence. So Ukraine was very briefly a state, but then it just got gobbled up by the Soviet Union, right away. So that happened to a lot of countries that achieved independence around that time. And Ukraine was no different. So it becomes the Ukrainian SSR, the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine. And of course, these people are starved to death, right? This is one of the biggest like genocides in human history, when the Ukrainians were starved almost out of existence by the Bolsheviks. And so like when World War II pops off, this is where a lot of Ukrainian nationalism movements, kind of start to form. It's... Let me just erase these lines here. So yeah, they went to help from World War II era Germany. So when they say that like there's fascists or whatever in Ukraine, it's like, well, okay, it kind of makes sense why they aligned with them, because those people were fighting the Soviets who almost massacred Ukraine out of existence. So there's a lot of bad blood there. A lot of modern Ukrainian problems are kind of a result of the Soviet Union always having like an eye on the world, an ideological eye. Your nationality didn't matter, right? I brought up many times in some of these videos how the national symbols, national songs, things like that were banned under the Soviet Union, right? So the Soviet Union, the state of Ukraine that existed within the Soviet Union, it wasn't really like a historical Ukraine, right? So Ukraine got Russia, or they got Crimea from Russia, but that was more just like a favor that Khrushchev did for, you know, the local party bosses, right? So these weren't really, they weren't really like countries like you would think of now, like a functioning, you know, a unified nationality. They were just borders that were set up by communists, right? So I kind of alluded to this in other videos too about like the Middle East, right? Like a big reason why there's so much trouble in the Middle East is because the borders are so unnatural. You know, and whenever you draw fake borders like that to create these countries, you're always going to have problems because you know, a lot of people end up on the wrong side of the fence. So, you know, Ukraine, very corrupt country. The United States tried to overthrow their government a couple times, and like from 2004 until like 2015-16 with some color revolutions there. Yeah, and then of course, you know, again, when the Soviet Union collapses in 1991, Ukraine does become an independent state, but it just keeps the borders that it had when it was the Ukrainian SSR. So that's where a lot of problems come from, and the State Department kind of knew that this was going to be an issue going forward, and kind of, you know, under like George H.W. Bush, you know, they forecasted problems, you know, which eventually, of course, popped off 20 years later. Yeah, so, you know what happened after that. Russia invades in 2022 because Ukraine, they kind of made allusions to, you know, to joining NATO, which, you know, it's kind of like the Russian version of the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? NATO would be putting missiles in Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin didn't want that. So, yeah. So now we've got a war, and yeah, it's a big mess. A lot of Americans getting very rich off of this. A lot of politicians, so they have an interest in seeing it continue, which is sad because, you know, I don't care what your position is on it. It's just not. It's not winnable. You can't go up against Russia with like a barely functioning state. You're just committing suicide for your people. But hey, Zelensky's a hero, right? Anyways. Don't have much more to say about this today. I'm kind of tired of talking about this country and hearing about it all the time. But yeah, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video.